The massive, crystalline doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a sound that shook the very foundation of Nexus Prime. Ambassador David Kane stepped through the threshold, his simple Earth uniform looking impossibly primitive against the backdrop of the most advanced governing body in the known universe. Behind him, the corridor stretched for miles, lined with the banners of 10,000 worlds, each representing civilizations that had existed for millennia before humans had even discovered fire. The chamber itself defied description. Carved from a single massive crystal formation that had taken the builders 3 centuries to complete, it rose upward until it disappeared into what appeared to be open space itself. Floating platforms surrounded the central speaking area, each one holding representatives from different corners of the galaxy. Kane could see the crystalline forms of the Vexhai Empire shimmering near the top, their bodies refracting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Below them, the massive bulk of the Thurok War Council sat in reinforced platforms, their gray skin marked with battle scars that told stories of conquest across entire star systems. Kane's escort, a tall figure in flowing robes whose face remained hidden behind a shifting energy field, gestured toward the center of the chamber. "The defendant will take their position," the figure announced, its voice echoing from speakers embedded in the crystal walls. As Kane walked toward the designated area, he could feel the weight of 1,000 alien gazes upon him. Some were curious, others hostile, but all carried the same underlying message. Humanity did not belong here. They were newcomers, barely worthy of acknowledgement by civilizations that had been traveling between stars since before Earth's continents had settled into their current positions. The High Arbiter's platform descended from somewhere high above, carrying with it a being that Kane had only seen in diplomatic briefings. Morden the Ancient was exactly as the files had described, a creature that appeared to be made of living stone, with eyes that glowed like dying stars. When it spoke, the voice seemed to come from the chamber walls themselves. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," Morden began, "we convene today to address a matter of unprecedented concern. The species known as humans has committed an act that challenges everything we understand about the natural order of the universe." Kane remained perfectly still as holographic displays activated around the chamber. The images they showed made several representatives recoil in visible fear. There, in crystal-clear detail, was Research Station Omega-7, humanity's most remote outpost in the Kepler system. But it was not the station itself that had drawn the galaxy's attention. Moving through the corridors of the station was a creature that no civilized being should have been able to look upon and survive. The Devourer, as it was known in the ancient texts, stood nearly 9 feet tall. Its form seemed to shift between solid matter and something that existed outside normal space-time. Tentacles that ended in claws capable of slicing through quantum steel writhed around its central mass, and its eyes burned with the light of consumed stars. But the truly shocking part of the footage was not the creature's presence. It was what Dr. Lisa Park, a xenobiologist from the University of Mars, was doing next to it. She was scratching it behind what appeared to be ears. The Devourer, the most feared predator in known space, was making a sound that could only be described as purring. Its massive form had curled up in what appeared to be the station's recreation area, and Dr. Park sat beside it as if it were nothing more than an oversized house pet. "Impossible," whispered Council Member Zethra of the Void Seekers, her forearms trembling as she spoke. "The Devourers consume entire worlds. They exist in the spaces between dimensions. No species has ever survived contact with one for more than minutes." Kane finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Honored representatives, what you are witnessing is the result of standard human diplomatic protocol applied to a new species." The silence that followed was deafening. Then gradually it was broken by what could only be described as incredulous laughter from several of the alien representatives. War Chief Krell of the Titan Dominion rose from his platform, his massive form bristling with weapons that had conquered star systems. "Diplomatic protocol? Human, your species has existed in space for less than 2 centuries. We have records of Devourer attacks going back 50,000 years. They are forces of destruction incarnate." Kane nodded respectfully. "That may be true, War Chief, but perhaps the question is not what the Devourers are, but what they need." The High Arbiter's glowing eyes focused on Kane with an intensity that made the air around him shimmer. "Explain yourself, human. What do you claim to know about these creatures that has escaped the attention of civilizations far older than yours? On the holographic displays, the footage continued. Dr. Park was now offering the devourer what appeared to be standard food rations from Earth. The creature accepted them delicately, its claws retracting to avoid damaging the packaging. When it had finished eating, it settled down further, allowing the human to continue what could only be described as petting. In our experience, Kane said carefully, most aggressive behavior stems from unmet needs. Hunger, fear, territorial disputes, loneliness. When we first encountered the devourer at Omega 7, our team made a simple decision. Instead of treating it as a threat to be destroyed, they treated it as a being to be understood. Representative Quindar of the Crystal Harmony leaned forward, her translucent form flickering with agitation. And you claim this creature simply chose to become peaceful? Kane shook his head. Not peaceful. Representative. Satisfied. Dr. Park's preliminary report suggests that devourers exist partially outside our dimension because they are searching for something that only exists in normal spacetime. When that need is met, they have no reason to continue their aggressive behavior. The implications hit the chamber like a physical force. If humans had truly discovered how to pacify devourers, it meant that the quarantine zones that had locked away entire sectors of space for millennia might no longer be necessary. It meant that the great defensive fleets that every major power maintained specifically to deal with devourer incursions might suddenly be obsolete. More troubling still, it meant that humanity, the newest and supposedly weakest member of the galactic community, had achieved something that the combined wisdom of thousands of civilizations had deemed impossible. High Arbiter Morden's stone features shifted into what might have been a frown. The Council requires proof, human. These could be fabricated images, designed to make your species appear more valuable than it truly is. Kane reached into his uniform and produced a small device. With your permission, Honored Arbiter, I would like to establish a live communication link with Research Station Omega 7. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives realized what Kane was suggesting. If the footage was real, if there truly was a tame devourer at the human research station, then everything they thought they knew about the universe's most dangerous predators was wrong, and if humanity had accomplished this feat with nothing more than what they called standard diplomatic protocol, then perhaps the galaxy needed to reconsider exactly who the real apex species might be. Morden's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Establish your communication link, human. But know this, if you are attempting to deceive this council, the consequences will extend far beyond your own life. Kane activated the device, and the chamber fell silent as they waited to see whether humanity had truly achieved the impossible, or whether they were about to witness the end of human civilization as they knew it. The holographic display in the center of the Galactic Council chamber flickered to life, showing the interior of Research Station Omega 7 in real time. Ambassador Kane stood perfectly still as the connection stabilized, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether humanity would be welcomed as equals in the galactic community or eliminated as a threat too dangerous to exist. Dr. Lisa Park appeared on the display, her brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and her lab coat stained with what appeared to be some kind of luminescent fluid. Behind her, moving with fluid grace around the station's common area, was the devourer. In the harsh lighting of the council chamber, the creature's otherworldly nature was even more apparent. Parts of its body seemed to phase in and out of reality, and when it moved, space itself appeared to bend around it. Dr. Park, Kane said, his voice carefully controlled, would you please explain to the Galactic Council how you achieved peaceful contact with the devourer? The xenobiologist looked directly into the camera, seemingly unaware that she was addressing the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy. Oh, that. Well, it was actually pretty straightforward once we figured out what was going on. A collective gasp rose from the assembled representatives. Representative Thymus of the Eternal Empire, whose species had lost 3 entire worlds to devourer attacks, spoke first. Straightforward? Human, do you comprehend what you are saying? Dr. Park glanced at something off camera, then back to the display. I understand why you might find it hard to believe, but the thing is, nobody ever actually tried to communicate with them before. You've all been treating them like mindless monsters. War Chief Krell slammed one of his massive fists against his platform's railing. Because they are mindless monsters. They consume everything in their path. They have destroyed civilizations. The devourer on the display suddenly moved closer to Dr. Park, its burning eyes focusing on the camera. Several representatives immediately backed away from their platforms, despite being thousands of light years away from the creature. But instead of attacking, the devourer simply settled down beside the human, allowing her to rest one hand against what appeared to be its flank. That's just it, Dr. Park continued, absently stroking the creature's shifting surface. They weren't destroying civilizations out of malice. They were looking for something. Think about it from their perspective. You exist partially outside normal space-time. You're incredibly powerful, but you're also incredibly alone. Every time you encounter other beings, they immediately attack you or run away. Council member Ventar of the Machine Collective processed this information with visible electronic flickers across his cybernetic implants. You are suggesting that devourer aggression is a response to being attacked first? Partly, yes, but it's more complex than that. Dr. Park gestured to her companion, who had begun making a sound that resonated through the chamber's speakers like a cross between whale song and distant thunder. They exist in a state between dimensions because they're searching for something that can only be found in normal spacetime. Specifically, they need physical contact with other living beings to maintain their connection to our reality. The implications of this statement hit the chamber like a shockwave. High Arbiter Morden leaned forward, his stone features creaking audibly. You are claiming that these creatures attack populated worlds because they require physical contact with other life forms? Not attack, Dr. Park corrected. Approach. The problem is that they're so powerful and so alien in appearance that most species assume hostile intent and respond with violence. This forces the devourers to defend themselves, which usually results in massive destruction. Over time, they began approaching inhabited worlds with increasingly aggressive postures because they had learned to expect violence. Representative Quindar's crystalline form flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among her species. But the ancient records speak of devourers consuming entire populations. Dr. Park nodded sadly. They do, but not intentionally. When they're attacked, they drain energy from their surroundings to fuel their defensive capabilities. Living beings are particularly energy-rich. What appears to be deliberate consumption is actually a desperate attempt to survive encounters with species that are trying to kill them. The devourer on the display raised what might have been its head, looking directly into the camera. When it spoke, the sound it made was unlike anything that had ever been heard in the council chamber. It was hauntingly beautiful, like music played on instruments that existed in mathematical dimensions beyond normal comprehension. What is it saying? Whispered Council Member Zethra. Dr. Park listened for a moment, then smiled. He's trying to greet you. His name translates roughly to wanderer who seeks warmth. He's actually quite pleased to know that other species are watching. He's been hoping to communicate with the wider galaxy for a very long time. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The creature that had been the source of nightmares for 50,000 years, the monster that had kept entire sectors of space quarantined, was trying to say hello. War Chief Krell's voice was barely above a whisper. How did you determine this? How did you learn to communicate with it? The same way humans have always learned to communicate with new species, Dr. Park replied. We observed, we listened, and we tried to understand instead of immediately categorizing it as a threat. When Wanderer first approached our station, our automatic defenses activated, but instead of running or attacking, our team leader, Commander Torres, made a decision that probably saved both our lives and Wanderer's. Ambassador Kane felt his chest tighten. He had read the classified reports, but hearing it described in front of the entire Galactic Council was something else entirely. What decision? High Arbiter Morden demanded. Commander Torres ordered all weapons powered down and told us to make no aggressive moves. Then he walked out of the station alone and unarmed and simply sat down in front of Wanderer. He waited. The holographic display switched to security footage from the station, showing a middle-aged man in a simple uniform, sitting cross-legged in the vacuum of space, protected only by his environmental suit. Looming over him was the full form of the devourer, its tentacles writhing and its eyes burning like miniature suns. For 6 hours, Dr. Park continued. Commander Torres just sat there. Wanderer circled the station, clearly agitated and confused. But gradually he began to calm down. When Commander Torres finally stood up and slowly extended his hand, Wanderer reached out and made contact. The footage showed the moment of first contact, a human hand touching an appendage that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. The effect was immediate and profound. The Devourer's aggressive posture melted away, replaced by what could only be described as relief. The moment they touched, Dr. Park explained, Wanderer's entire energy signature changed. He had found what he was looking for, genuine contact with another living being, offered freely and without fear. Representative Timos spoke into the silence. And the other Devourers? Are you claiming that all of them could be pacified in this manner? Dr. Park's expression became more serious. We've only worked with Wanderer so far, but his communications suggest that there are others like him, scattered across the galaxy, all searching for the same thing. If we could establish proper first contact protocols, it might be possible to end the Devourer threat entirely. The chamber erupted in urgent conversations as representatives began to grasp the full implications of what they were hearing. If humanity's approach could be replicated, it would fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy. Species that had spent millennia in fear could reclaim vast areas of space. Resources that had been locked away in quarantine zones could finally be accessed. But it also meant acknowledging that humanity, despite being the newest members of the galactic community, had achieved something that eluded every other civilization. High Arbiter Morden raised one massive stone hand, and the chamber fell silent. Dr. Park, would it be possible for a delegation from the Council to visit your station and observe these interactions firsthand? Dr. Park glanced at Wanderer, who had moved closer to the camera. The creature made another musical sound and she nodded. Wanderer says he would welcome visitors, but he asks that they come with peaceful intentions. He's very excited about the possibility of meeting other species under better circumstances than those that have occurred in the past. Ambassador Kane stepped forward. The Earth government would be honored to host such a delegation. However, we would request that all weapons be left behind, and that first contact protocols be established jointly to ensure the safety of all participants. The silence that followed was pregnant with possibility and danger. Humanity had just offered to mediate between the galaxy's greatest fear and its most powerful governments. The decision that came next would either establish humans as the galaxy's premier diplomatic species, or mark them as a threat too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. War Chief Krell spoke first, his voice thoughtful rather than aggressive. If what you claim is true, human, then perhaps it is time for the galaxy to reconsider its approach to many things. 3 days after the historic council session, the first joint diplomatic mission in galactic history was preparing to depart for Research Station Omega-7. Ambassador Kane stood in the hangar bay of the massive council vessel Harmony's Edge, watching as representatives from 12 different species made final preparations for what many considered either the most important diplomatic mission in recorded history or a catastrophic mistake that would end in everyone's death. The ship itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built by the combined efforts of 6 different civilizations. Its hull incorporated Vex-High crystalline technology for structural integrity, Thorok defensive systems capable of withstanding stellar bombardment, and Luminar energy cores that could power small planets. But despite all this advanced technology, the most crucial equipment on board was remarkably simple: a collection of chairs, cushions, and seating arrangements designed to accommodate beings who might need to sit still for extended periods. Dr. Park had been very specific about the requirements for successful contact with Wanderer. No sudden movements, no aggressive postures, and above all, patience. The hardest part of first contact with a Devourer, she had explained, was simply being still long enough for them to overcome millennia of learned defensive responses. Kane reviewed the delegation roster one final time. Representative Thymos had volunteered to represent the Eternal Empire, despite the fact that his species had lost 3 worlds to Devourer attacks. War Chief Krell had surprised everyone by personally joining the mission, claiming that warriors needed to understand their enemies before they could truly defeat them. Council member Ventar represented the Machine Collective, while Representative Quindar spoke for the Crystal Harmony. Each delegation member had undergone 3 days of intensive briefing on human first contact protocols, though Kane suspected that no amount of preparation could truly ready them for what they were about to experience. Commander Torres met them at the airlock of Omega-7, his weathered face showing the strain of the past few days. Behind him, the station hummed with activity, as the small human crew prepared to host the most important gathering in their species' history. "Welcome to Omega-7, Torres said as the delegation filed through the airlock. "Before we proceed, I need to make something clear to everyone. Wanderer is not a pet and he is not tame. He is a highly intelligent being who has chosen to cooperate with us. The moment any of you displays aggressive behavior or treats him as a curiosity to be studied rather than a person to be respected, this entire meeting ends." War Chief Krell nodded approvingly. "Spoken like a true warrior, Commander. A worthy opponent deserves worthy respect." Dr. Park appeared at the far end of the corridor, and beside her moved a shadow that seemed to bend light around itself. As Wanderer approached, several of the delegation members instinctively stepped backward. The Devourer's form was even more unsettling in person than it had appeared on the holographic displays. Parts of his body existed in what appeared to be normal space, while other sections phased in and out of visibility. His eyes, burning like distant supernovas, fixed on each member of the delegation in turn. But instead of the aggressive posture that historical records had always described, Wanderer moved with careful, deliberate slowness. When he spoke, the musical tones that emerged from his form were soft and questioning, Dr. Park translated. "He's asking if you've come to learn or to judge. He says he can sense the fear and curiosity in all of you, but he's hoping that the curiosity will prove stronger." Representative Tymo stepped forward first, his pale blue skin showing the ritual scars that marked him as a survivor of the Devourer attacks on his homeworld. "I have come to understand," he said slowly, "why my people died, and whether their deaths could have been prevented." Wanderer's response was a complex harmony of tones that seemed to contain both sorrow and hope. Dr. Park's translation was barely above a whisper. "He says he remembers your world. He was young then and desperate, and when your people attacked him, he fought back without understanding the consequences. He has carried the weight of those deaths for centuries." The silence that followed was profound. Thyma stood motionless, staring at the creature that had destroyed everything he had once known. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but thick with emotion. "Can you show me what happened? Can you help me understand?" Wanderer moved closer, extending one of his shifting appendages. "He's offering to share the memory directly," Dr. Park explained. "But be warned, you'll experience it from his perspective. You'll feel what he felt." Thymos reached out without hesitation and made contact with Wanderer's outstretched limb. The moment their forms touched, both beings became still as statues. The air around them seemed to shimmer with energy, and those watching could hear faint echoes of sound that might have been voices or screams, or both. After several minutes, Thymos stepped back. His face was wet with tears, but his expression held something that hadn't been there before: understanding. "My people attacked first," he said quietly. "We saw him approaching and assumed the worst. We fired on him with everything we had, and when that failed to drive him away, we evacuated the civilian population and then detonated our planetary defense grid." War Chief Krell's massive form shifted. "A sound tactical decision against an unknown threat." "Perhaps," Thymos replied, "but he wasn't a threat. He was a lost child, looking for someone to help him understand why he existed between worlds. When we attacked, he drew energy from our planet's biosphere to defend himself. He didn't even realize that he was killing millions of living beings in the process. To him, it felt like drawing warmth from a fire." Wanderer made another series of musical sounds, and Dr. Park nodded. "He's asking if you can forgive him for not understanding what he was doing." Thymos looked up at the creature that towered over him. "Can you forgive my people for not trying to understand what you were?" The response was immediate, a harmony of tones that needed no translation. Wanderer lowered his massive form until he was at Thymos's eye level, and the two beings simply looked at each other for a long moment. Council member Ventar stepped forward, his cybernetic implants flickering as he processed what he had witnessed. "This changes everything. If Devourers can be reasoned with, if they can form emotional bonds with other species, then the fundamental assumptions that underlie our entire approach to galactic security are incorrect." Commander Torres nodded. "That's exactly what we've been trying to tell you. The universe is a lot bigger and stranger than any of us realized, but it's also a lot more connected. Wanderer isn't the only one of his kind searching for contact with other species. According to him, There are dozens of devourers scattered across the galaxy, all of them isolated and increasingly desperate. Representative Quindar's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. How many worlds have been lost because we never tried to communicate? Thousands, Dr. Park replied sadly. But Wanderer believes it's not too late to change that. He's been in contact with others of his kind, and they're willing to attempt peaceful first contact if the galaxy's species are willing to try a different approach. War Chief Krell moved closer to Wanderer, his warrior's instincts apparently telling him that this was a being worthy of respect rather than fear. What would this new approach require? Wanderer's response was longer and more complex than his previous communications. Dr. Park listened carefully before translating. He says that his kind exists in a state between dimensions because they're searching for something that can only be found through connection with other living beings. They need what he calls the warmth of recognition, the acknowledgement that they exist and have value as individuals rather than as forces of destruction. In practical terms, Commander Torres added, it means developing new first contact protocols based on patience and genuine curiosity, rather than immediate defensive responses. When a devourer approaches a populated system, instead of attacking or fleeing, the inhabitants would need to send a single individual to make peaceful contact. The implications were staggering. It would require every major civilization in the galaxy to fundamentally rethink their approach to one of the universe's greatest threats. It would demand a level of trust and cooperation that had never before existed between the galaxy's diverse species, but the alternative was continuing to lose worlds and civilizations to conflicts that, as they now knew, were entirely preventable. High Arbiter Morden's voice echoed through the station's communication system. He had remained aboard Harmony's Edge, monitoring the proceedings remotely. The Council will convene an emergency session to discuss these revelations. If what we have witnessed here can be replicated, it may herald a new age for galactic civilization. Wanderer made one final series of sounds, directed at the delegation as a whole. Dr. Park smiled as she translated. He says he hopes that this is the beginning of true understanding between all the galaxy's children. He's been alone for so long that he had almost forgotten what hope felt like. Ambassador Kane looked around at the assembled representatives, seeing in their faces the same mixture of wonder and possibility that he felt himself. Humanity had done more than just tame a monster, were they? The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 18 hours straight, and Ambassador Kane could feel the tension in the massive chamber growing thicker with each passing minute. What had begun as a discussion about new first contact protocols had rapidly evolved into something far more complex. A complete reevaluation of the balance of power that had governed galactic civilization for millennia. High Arbiter Morden stood at the center of the chamber, his stone features showing signs of strain that Kane had never seen before. Around him, representatives from nearly every major civilization argued with an intensity that bordered on desperation. The successful contact with Wanderer had proven that humanity's approach to the Devourer problem was not only viable but revolutionary. Now, every species was scrambling to understand what that meant for their own position in the galactic hierarchy. War Chief Krell slammed his fist against his platform's railing, the sound echoing through the chamber like a gunshot. The humans have been in space for less than 2 centuries, he roared. How is it possible that they achieved what our greatest warriors and scientists could not accomplish in 50,000 years? Representative Thymos, who had remained largely silent since returning from Omega-7, finally spoke. Perhaps, War Chief, the question is not how they succeeded, but why we failed. I have touched minds with a devourer. I have seen our conflicts from their perspective. Every single engagement we have had with these beings has been based on the assumption that they were mindless predators. We never once considered that they might be people. Council member Ventar's cybernetic implants flickered rapidly as he processed data streams from across the galaxy. My analysis indicates that the human success stems from their willingness to apply social solutions to what we categorized as military problems. This suggests a fundamental difference in cognitive approach that we may have overlooked. Representative Quindar's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. The implications extend far beyond the devourer situation. If humanity's diplomatic methods prove superior to our established protocols, What does that mean for every other unsolved conflict in the galaxy? Kane had been listening to the debate for hours, waiting for the right moment to speak. Now, as the various representatives began to realize the full scope of what humanity's success might mean, he stepped forward. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice cutting through the arguing, "I think we may be approaching this from the wrong direction. This isn't about human superiority or the failure of other species. It's about different perspectives leading to different solutions." High Arbiter Morden's glowing eyes focused on Kane. "Explain." "Every species in this chamber has achieved incredible things," Kane continued. "The Vexhi built structures that defy physics itself. The Thurok have conquered challenges that would destroy entire solar systems. The Machine Collective has created artificial intelligence that rivals organic consciousness. Each of you has approached the universe from the perspective of your unique evolutionary history and cultural development." War Chief Krell growled low in his throat. "And humans? What is your unique perspective, Ambassador?" Kane smiled slightly. "Humans are generalists. We evolved as persistence hunters on a world where survival required adapting to constantly changing conditions. We learned to see patterns where others see chaos, and to find common ground between seemingly incompatible elements. When we encountered the Devourers, we didn't see ultimate predators or cosmic forces of destruction. We saw beings who were acting in ways that suggested unmet needs." Representative Zethra of the Void Seekers leaned forward. "You are saying that human success comes from stubbornness?" "Persistence," Kane corrected, "and curiosity. When something doesn't make sense to us, our first instinct isn't to destroy it or flee from it. It's to keep looking until we understand what we're missing." The chamber fell silent as the implications of this sank in. Species that had spent millennia developing advanced military technologies, exploring the deepest reaches of space, and building vast interstellar empires had been approaching one of their greatest challenges with assumptions that prevented them from seeing the real solution. High Arbiter Morden spoke slowly. "You are suggesting that the Council has been guilty of what humans call tunnel vision." "Not guilty," Kane replied carefully. "Just limited by success. When you're the best warriors in the galaxy, every problem looks like something that can be solved through force. When you're master engineers, every challenge appears to require a technological solution. But some problems require stepping outside those frameworks entirely." Council member Ventar processed this for several seconds. "The logical conclusion is that different types of problems may require different types of specialists. Military threats require warriors. Engineering challenges require builders. But social problems may require diplomats." War Chief Krell's expression shifted as he considered this. "You're proposing a new role for humanity within the galactic hierarchy." Kane nodded. "Not a superior role, just a different one. Humans could serve as mediators when conflicts arise between species with fundamentally incompatible worldviews. We could investigate situations where traditional approaches have failed to produce results. We could—" He paused, knowing that his next words would either secure humanity's future or mark them for elimination. "We could help the galaxy develop new ways of thinking about old problems." The silence that followed was deafening. Kane had just proposed that humanity, the newest and apparently weakest member of the galactic community, be given authority to intervene in conflicts between civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Representative Thymos spoke first. "The human approach saved my people from carrying hatred for a tragedy that was based on misunderstanding. If there are other conflicts in the galaxy that stem from similar misunderstandings—" "There are," High Arbiter Mordoon said heavily. "The contested zones along the rim contain 3 separate territorial disputes that have been ongoing for centuries. The neutral sectors are neutral precisely because none of the surrounding species can find common ground. The deep quarantine contains threats that we have never understood well enough to properly address." Kane felt his heart racing, but kept his voice steady. "Earth would be honored to assist in addressing these challenges, if the Council believes our perspective might be valuable." War Chief Krell stood slowly, his massive form imposing even at a distance. "Human, you realize what you are proposing? You would be asking the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations to trust their most intractable problems to a species that has barely begun to explore space. I'm proposing that we try a different approach to problems where the old approaches have failed," Kane replied. "If human methods prove ineffective, you've lost nothing but time. But if they succeed, Representative Quindar said softly, then perhaps the galaxy is more capable of growth and change than we believed. High Arbiter Morden raised one massive stone hand, and the chamber fell silent. The proposal before the Council is unprecedented. Humanity requests formal recognition as a specialist diplomatic species, with authority to investigate and mediate conflicts that have proven resistant to conventional solutions. The pause that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Kane could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, knowing that the next few moments would determine whether humanity would become a valued partner in galactic civilization or be remembered as the upstart species that had overreached and fallen. All in favor? Morden asked. One by one, platforms throughout the chamber began to glow with the soft light that indicated an affirmative vote. Representative Thymos was first, followed by Council Member Ventar. War Chief Krell hesitated for a long moment, then activated his platform's vote indicator with what might have been the ghost of a smile. When the count was complete, Kane stared at the results in disbelief. Not unanimous, but close enough. Humanity had just been granted authority to attempt diplomatic solutions to some of the galaxy's oldest and most dangerous conflicts. High Arbiter. Morden's voice carried a note of something that might have been humor. Congratulations, Ambassador Kane. Your species has just achieved something that may be even more dangerous than taming. Devourers, you have convinced the galaxy to voluntarily change its mind. Kane bowed deeply to the assembled representatives. We won't disappoint you. See that you don't, War Chief Krell rumbled. Because if the human approach proves to be nothing more than lucky guesswork, the consequences will extend far beyond diplomatic embarrassment. As the session formally adjourned and representatives began filing out of the chamber, Kane realized that humanity had just committed itself to solving problems that had stymied galactic civilization for centuries. They had asked for the chance to prove that their perspective had value, and now they would have to deliver results that justified the trust they had been given. The real work was about to begin, and failure was not an option. Because if humanity failed to live up to its promise, but as Kane thought about Dr. Park sitting beside Wanderer, patiently working to understand a being that everyone else had written off as a monster, he felt a surge of confidence. Humans had 6 months after the historic council vote, Ambassador Kane stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Prometheus, watching as 3 different species fleets maintained careful formations around the contested world of Kepler 442b. For 200 years, the hegemony of worlds, the Crystal Harmony, and the Void Seekers had fought over the resource-rich planet, each claiming ancient territorial rights that predated the other's existence in the sector. Thousands had died in skirmishes that never resolved anything, and the planet itself had become a wasteland from repeated orbital bombardments. Today, for the first time since the conflict began, representatives from all 3 species were gathering in the same location without weapons drawn. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had become humanity's chief xenopsychologist after her success with Wanderer, appeared beside Kane at the observation window. The preliminary psychological profiles are fascinating, she said, reviewing data on her tablet. Each species is operating from completely different assumptions about what the conflict is actually about. Kane nodded, unsurprised. In the months since humanity had been granted diplomatic authority, they had discovered that most seemingly intractable galactic conflicts stemmed from fundamental misunderstandings about what the other parties actually wanted. What did you find? The hegemony believes this is about territorial expansion and military dominance. They're convinced that the other 2 species are planning to use Kepler 442b as a staging ground for further conquests. The Crystal Harmony thinks it's about resource extraction rights, and they're terrified that the others will strip mine the planet's unique crystalline formations. The Void Seekers are operating under the assumption that this is about ancient burial grounds that must be protected from desecration. Kane rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar weight of another impossible problem that humanity had volunteered to solve. So we have 3 species fighting over the same piece of real estate for 3 completely different reasons, none of which actually conflict with the others. Exactly. The hegemony wants military security, the Crystal Harmony wants sustainable resource extraction, and the Void Seekers want to preserve historical sites. If they had been talking to each other instead of shooting at each other, they could have worked out a sharing arrangement decades ago. The communication system activated, carrying the voice of Captain Rodriguez from the bridge. "Ambassador, the last of the delegations has arrived. We're ready to begin the preliminary sessions." Kane took a deep breath. This was the first major test of humanity's new role as galactic mediators, and the entire galaxy was watching. If they succeeded in resolving the Kepler 442b dispute, it would validate the Council's decision to trust human diplomatic methods. If they failed, it would confirm the suspicions of those who believed that humanity had simply gotten lucky with Wanderer. The conference room that had been prepared aboard Prometheus was unlike any diplomatic venue in galactic history. Instead of the formal, intimidating chambers typically used for interspecies negotiations, Dr. Vasquez had designed a space that felt more like a comfortable living room. Seating arrangements were flexible and non-hierarchical. Lighting was warm and adjustable to accommodate different species' visual needs, and the walls displayed slowly shifting patterns designed to promote calm and reduce stress. Fleet Commander Daxton of the Hegemony arrived first, his armored form bristling with barely contained aggression. "Human," he said without preamble, "I hope you understand the magnitude of what you have undertaken. This conflict has claimed thousands of lives. If your talking fails to produce results, those deaths will have been for nothing." Kane met the fleet commander's gaze steadily. "Commander, I believe those deaths will have meaning regardless of what happens here. The question is whether we can prevent future deaths by finding a better way forward." Representative Melandra of the Crystal Harmony entered next, her translucent form flickering with the nervous energy patterns that her species displayed under stress. "I must express skepticism about this entire process. The hegemony has shown nothing but aggression for 2 centuries. How can mere words change fundamental nature?" Before Kane could respond, Council Member Vorthak of the Void Seekers glided into the room, his ethereal form barely visible except for the soft glow that marked his presence. The ancestors whisper that change comes not from words but from understanding. Perhaps these humans have learned to hear whispers that others miss. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, carrying with her a collection of objects that had been carefully selected for their psychological impact. "Before we discuss territory or resources or rights," she said, placing the items on the central table, "I'd like each of you to tell me about something that your species values that the others might not understand." Fleet Commander Daxton looked at the collection suspiciously. "What is the purpose of this exercise?" "Understanding," Kane replied simply. "Dr. Vasquez has found that most conflicts escalate because each side operates from assumptions about what the other sides want, without ever confirming whether those assumptions are accurate." Representative Melandra moved closer to examine the objects on the table. Among them was a small crystal formation that seemed to sing with harmonic frequencies, a piece of ancient metal that bore the scars of countless battles, and a delicate sculpture that appeared to shift between dimensions. "These items, they represent our cultures? They represent the things that each of your species considers most valuable," Dr. Vasquez explained. "The crystal sings with the mathematical harmonies that the crystal harmony finds beautiful. The metal fragment carries the history of honorable battles that give meaning to hegemony military tradition. The dimensional sculpture reflects the connection between past and future that drives Void Seeker spiritual practices." Councilmember Vorthak's glow brightened as he focused on the dimensional sculpture. "You understand the importance of ancestral connections. We understand that it's important to you," Kane corrected gently. "We may not share your specific values, but we recognize that they have meaning and deserve respect." Fleet Commander Daxton picked up the battle-scarred metal, his armored fingers tracing the marks left by ancient weapons. "This fragment, it comes from the Battle of 7 Suns. My great ancestor fought in that engagement. And the crystal formation resonates at frequencies that tell the story of star formation in the Andromeda Galaxy," Representative Melandra added, her form pulsing in harmony with the crystal's song. "My people use such formations to teach children about the mathematical beauty of the universe." Dr. Vasquez nodded encouragingly. "Now, knowing what you know about what the others value, tell me what you think each of you is really fighting for on Kepler 442b. The silence that followed was profound. Kane could almost see the mental gears turning as each representative began to reconsider their assumptions about their opponent's motivations. Fleet Commander Daxton spoke first, his voice thoughtful rather than aggressive. "The hegemony seeks to ensure that Kepler 442b does not become a staging ground for attacks against our core worlds. We have no interest in the planet itself, only in preventing its use by hostile forces. Representative Melandra's form flickered with what might have been surprise. The crystal harmony requires access to the planet's unique crystalline formations for our cultural and scientific development. We had assumed that the others wanted to prevent us from accessing these resources. Council member Vorthak's glow shifted to a different spectrum entirely. The Void Seekers must preserve the ancient burial sites on Kepler 442b's southern continent. Our ancestors' spirits reside there, and their desecration would sever our connection to the wisdom of ages past. Dr. Vasquez smiled as the realization hit all three representatives simultaneously. So the hegemony wants military security, the crystal harmony wants access to resources, and the Void Seekers want protection of historical sites. Is there any reason why all three of those goals can't be achieved on the same planet? Fleet Commander Daxton was the first to laugh, a sound like grinding stone that nevertheless carried genuine humor. 200 years of warfare, and none of us ever asked the others what they actually wanted. The crystalline formations are located primarily in the northern hemisphere, Representative Melandra said slowly. They have no military value and pose no threat to burial sites in the south. And the southern continent's burial grounds could be protected by joint patrols, Councilmember Vorthak added. Such cooperation would actually enhance security for all parties. Kane felt the tension in the room dissolve as the three representatives began to see possibilities instead of obstacles. Would you be willing to work together to develop a comprehensive plan for shared stewardship of Kepler 442b? The negotiations that followed took place over several days, but the fundamental breakthrough had already occurred. Once each species understood what the others actually needed, finding mutually beneficial solutions became a matter of logistics rather than ideology. The hegemony would provide security for the entire planet. The crystal harmony would share the scientific knowledge gained from their resource. When news of the successful resolution reached the Galactic Council, the response was immediate and overwhelming.